Right. Okay. So we're now going to we're going to watch a video pre-recorded about the Tickle versus Giggle and women-only spaces.
So I'm just sitting here on my bed going to talk about all of this to myself, which is kind of therapeutic. So thank you for the opportunity. Basically, a trans-identified male named Roxy Tickle filed an Australian human rights complaint against Giggle and myself in January 2022, which led to the potential of a federal court case. What happened is in September last year, it would have been me. I don't remember it because, it was just another work day. So I have no recollection specifically about it, but I know it would have been me. I removed Roxy Tickle from the Giggle app. Now, the Giggle onboarding selfie, which is just to see if someone's male or female, is set at 94% accuracy. And it works exactly as you would expect 94% accuracy to work. And it's just that this is the most logical, simplest, easiest, least invasive way to create an online female-only space is just a selfie. I mean, we all take selfies constantly every day. There's nothing controversial about that. We're constantly judging photos of everybody in society. So saying, oh, that's male or that's female should be like the least controversial thing on the planet. When we were developing the app, not for a second did I think that this would be controversial in any way, shape, or form, but it is the most. And, there are men who constantly try to see if they can get on. And I understand that just in terms of the fun of it or whatever. And we have it set to 94% to create a situation where we would rather remove a male than deny a female. Basically, yes. So Roxanne Tickle did make it through the selfie. And created some profiles. And as soon as, I don't remember the specifics of the exact thing because I've seen other males. So I just know from what I do in general. I'll see a picture of a male and go, oh, that's a male. Off you go. Get off. What? No other user or potential user of Giggle has ever contacted my personal / professional phone, but my phone, just in general, my phone number, I was just instantly freaked out by it because it's just instantly scary behavior. My mind immediately went to oh, what kind of person am I dealing with here? Because then there was some missed calls from them, and I was like, what this app is, and it's just going from, it's so inappropriate to call my phone, And so I actually called my dad. So I didn't respond or anything, obviously. And I called my dad and I said, what do I do? And he said, block the number and don't tell your mother, because my mum gets very, very scared and a little bit hysterical about safety and things like that. So I didn't, and I blocked and I kind of just forgot about it. And then, life happened, found out I was pregnant, all of that exciting stuff. And then in January of 2022, I was actually in isolation with COVID, 15 weeks pregnant, very, very sick. And I got an email from the Australian Human Rights Commission saying that a complaint had been made against Giggle and myself, which at first I thought it was sort of like this joke. At this point, I had been introduced to this person's reputation a little bit more, in the sense that in Australia, he has made complaints about other women, just to either their workplaces, women who advocate for women's rights. So there's a pattern emerging there. I immediately called the women in Australia who are involved in this and with legal backgrounds or legal expertise, and was like, what do I do? It was the start of responding to the Human Rights Commission complaint, which was accusing me of discriminating against somebody based on gender identity. And my argument for this was, and always has been, is that no, I'm actually not discriminating against trans women based on gender identity. Giggle is an app for females. And, especially in Australia, we have the right of association, blah, blah, blah. So you can have something like that. It's not it's like Giggle is for females plus cis men, and the only people who can't come on the app are males with a trans identity or the gender identity. Then you'd be like, oh, that's that that seems odd. It's just for females. It's based on biological sex. So if you're male, you're male. Your gender identity is completely irrelevant to me. Like if you're female, your gender identity is irrelevant. And on Giggle, we actually have categories for gender identity for females who are exploring that. And it's actually a beautiful community developing in Giggle support in gender identity, because there are women who live in countries where gender nonconformity is very much frowned upon, as being polite about it, but there is what you could basically say a phobia about that, and they are treated horribly in society. And so being able to talk with other women who are going through this, or who can offer advice or empowerment, all different things, is, I think, a really positive thing to happen. So there's no gender identity discriminations. And so we responded like this to the Australian Human Rights Commission, also then saying, Roxy Tickle had called my phone, which he had detailed in the human rights complaint, but he positioned it as being reasonable in terms of he'd done all the reasonable means to try and get access to the app, and so he was left with no other option than to do a human rights complaint. And I was like, no, you absolutely terrified me, because I thought, what's next? You're going to turn up at my house. So just completely different perceptions of behaviour there. So we told the Australian Human Rights Commission of this. There was also, the legal team had found, by doing a search on Twitter, I blocked Roxy Tickle on Twitter, not knowing it was Roxy Tickle. So we got the complaint on the 20th of January. On the 24th of January, he was claiming that he was on the app and that Giggle had been hacked, which that hadn't happened. And so he was sort of saying really, sort of defamatory things about the platform and claiming he was on it. So it was like, well, what's the truth here? Now, I know that he's not on it. But the Australian Human Rights Commission did not accept any of our arguments, didn't really acknowledge them. They just said there's a case to be had here, basically. And so I could go, the goal of the Australian Human Rights Commission is I could go and have what's called conciliation. And so I'd sit in a room with a conciliator and Roxy Tickle, and apparently be told to explain why I don't think that Roxy Tickle or trans women are women. And we were told that to resolve it, we would have to let trans-identified males on the app. I would have to, both Giggle and myself would have to go to gender identity education, and that we'd have to apologize, I think. Oh, and also that we'd have to moderate how women speak on Giggle Talk, so not to offend trans women. So I said no to conciliation, knowing that the Human Rights Commission would potentially advise Roxy to go to federal court, or could say, look, there's actually no case here, so move on. But the Australian Human Rights Commission did advise to go to federal court, and so there was 60 days to file. I waited until 5 p.m. on the 61st day thinking it was done, and it wasn't. I announced that, we got out of this, it didn't happen, and then a week later we got served with the papers that had been filed with 2.5 hours to spare. And the federal court case was was alleging unlawful discrimination, again against Giggle and myself personally. The thing that was the craziest in it, I was referred to as the second respondent, and that they said that I was in breach of something because I'd referred to trans women, including the applicant, as male. And so it's just so crazy to get a lawsuit where they're trying to punish you for telling the truth. It's psychologically harmful, yes, but it's so confusing. You feel like you're upside down. You're just going what world am I living in? When federal court would actually send a document saying that I'm in breach of something for saying the truth. I was saying to our barrister, do I have to lie under oath? What's expected of me here? Because trans women are male. It's actually the only prerequisite. I can't be a trans woman. That's just how it is. This is just madness. So basically, we had 28 days to respond when we got this. And at the time, I was 27 days away from giving birth. I'm now 2 days away. And so we were putting everything together to respond. The legal team was brilliant and at work. And then on Monday, we got notice that the case had been withdrawn. We have no information as to why that is, so all we can go by is assumptions. My assumption ultimately is that I think we would win in court, and we would be able to protect female-only spaces Australia-wide from any kind of treatment like this. And that's not in the best interest of the transactivism lobby. It is much better to keep the law as obscure and as it is right now. It's very muddled and trying to intimidate women with it. But at the same time, I hope that women in Australia and in other places have seen, like, while it's been traumatic and stressful standing up to this, if you stand up to them, they'll back down. They just will, because they don't expect you to. They're quite used to, because they were doing this in silence for a while, and women businesses and things were just sort of giving into them out of fear, because no one likes being called a bigot or a transphobe or discriminatory or anything like that. It's horrible, especially when you know you're not that kind of person. But when we are all getting educated on this and understanding that being called that doesn't mean you are anymore. Yeah, hopefully it just inspires women to go, no, I'm going to stand up to it as well. And sure, the more women who do it, the shorter the time of the punishment is the process will be. Eventually, we'll all just have stood up to it and we'll have drowned it out. What we've experienced this week is a huge win. We didn't have to go to court for it. In Australia, because of the Sex Discrimination Act and the gender identity clause in it, it's still, one would argue, a little bit muddled. It's there to be scrutinised. And in the event that we're sort of called on to fight it again, we will. I'll always fight for it. I'm not going to back down now. But at the same time, right at this very moment, I'm going to enjoy having a baby. Hopefully she's out soon, because I'm going out of my mind. Yeah, and enjoy and celebrate female-only spaces and grow our little startup into something that we've always had a vision for, that for the last 2.5 years we've had to be so stunted by all of this because, we sort of get cancelled as a company out of the gate because we were doing something purely for women. Investment firms won't work with us in Australia. Marketing firms won't work with us. So you're just sort of left to your own devices, and creating a startup is difficult for anyone, for any startup. If these were easy, everyone would do them. But this has been particularly difficult, but we're in a really good position right now, and we're just so excited for the next phases. So thank you so much for letting me vent all of this. Hopefully I wasn't too boring and sort of gave some kind of insight into the whole process. And yeah, again, all I can say, if you find yourself in a position where you're being bullied by these activists, stand your ground.